I'm a hair mineral analysis expert. I have a background in functional medicine, and I educate people using HTMA testing to maximize health, erase debilitating symptoms, and gain energy. I'm a multi-time kettlebell sport world champion, and I'm constantly searching for high-performance pros from all over the world to bring you this human optimization podcast. My name is Lisa Pitel-Killah. Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Human Optimization Podcast. I am your host, Lisa Pitel-Killah, and I am excited to introduce today Wendie Trubow. She is an MD, an MBA, IFM certified practitioner. She is passionate about helping women optimize their health and lives as a functional medicine gynecologist. Through her struggles with mold and metal toxicity, celiac disease, and other health issues, Dr. Trubow has developed a deep sense of compassion and expertise for what her patients are facing. She's the co-author of Dirty Girl, Ditch the Toxins, Look Great, and Feel Freaking Amazing, and has been regularly featured in MindBodyGreen and Huffington Post. She is an accomplished speaker and previously had her own television show. She's on the faculty at A4M and a speaker for their conferences along with other national societies. She and her partner will be releasing their next book in 2024 called Sweaty and Bitchy. And we're going to talk about Dirty Girl and a little about that new book coming out in 2024. But welcome, Wendie.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's great to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. And, talking about mold and metal and celiac, it resonates with me because I've been through all of those things and I do have celiac. So I'm excited to talk about some of these things and, of course, hear about what's in your book too. But you know what? I always love to start with just you giving a little bit more background about how you got from where you started to here today. So share that with our audience.
Sure. I think there's a couple of what I'll call camel humps, right? It's not a straight line into dysfunction, right? And then into functional medicine. I was born full term. I was breastfed, so I had a good start, and I had the worst genes ever. I actually sat my parents down. They're divorced, but it's been so long that they go to the same events, and I sat them down and I said, guys, I'm happy that you reproduced, but you really shouldn't have, because the combination of their genes together is terrible. So I started out with a lot of genetic, issues. So I have 2 genes for celiac, 2 genes for the MTHFR mutation. I have one of the COMTs, 2 vitamin D deficiency genes, and they set the stage for poor absorption and dysfunction.
Right.
Now, layer on the standard American diet of the 70s and 80s and microwaved foods. And by the time I was in my teens, I had unresponsive iron deficiency. And what I mean by that is I took iron 3 times a day and it didn't do anything. I was anemic. I was iron deficient. Fast forward to my 20s, I now have irritable bowel. I don't know what's wrong, but I'm just like, I got to be careful what I eat, where I eat, when I eat, because I had really bad gas and bloating and diarrhea, sometimes constipation, all over the map. Fast forward to my 30s, I'm married. I have 1 kid. I just delivered my 2nd kid. And I can barely get out of bed. The only reason I get out of bed is because I'm the primary breadwinner. Yeah. So most days I'm like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. And I had issues head to toe. And my husband said to me, hey, before you go back to work, why don't you go see my mentor? And he was a functional medicine doc, and he did this workup on me, and he diagnosed me with a ton of food sensitivities and celiac disease. And that was my entry into functional medicine and the approach that, maybe there's another way out there. Yeah. And I sat on it. I looked at it. My husband, in the meantime, opened up a functional medicine practice. And then one day I had this epiphany, like, you know what? There's a lot of people with good hands who can do surgery, because I was a obstetrician gynecologist. So I delivered babies and did surgery. Yeah. I was like, there's a lot of people who can do that, but there's not a lot of people who can think about your health and drill into the root cause. So I went into functional medicine about 4 years after I was diagnosed with celiac because of that experience. And then fast forward again, I'm now perimenopausal. I've been working on my health like a maniac for 14 years. And actually 15 years, I had been like all about my health. And we come back from this amazing vacation where we went to France. And after the vacation, not during the vacation, but after the vacation, my hair started falling out in droves. I gained 9 pounds and I had this rash. Like it was one of the, it was on my eyelids, under
Oh,
my nose, and under my
goodness.
chin. And I wanted to rip my face off.
Yeah.
And right before I went on my trip, I did this testing for mycotoxins. And when I got back from my trip, I learned, oh, I actually have 5 strains of mycotoxins. Those are the toxins that mold puts out. So I started treating that, but it didn't fix the hair loss and the weight gain. The rash got a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And so fast forward another few months and I'm listening to the radio and I hear that when Notre Dame burned, it released 500 tons of lead dust into the air. And the closer you were to Notre Dame, the more exposure you got, and the farther away, the less. That makes sense, right? That, you're near the epicenter. Well, guess what? I spent a week at the epicenter. And
Oh
I
my
remember
goodness.
remarking like, God, it's so dusty here. And it was lead dust.
Wow.
So I said to my husband, oh my God, I got an exposure. I got a lead exposure. And then I said, we all got it, but I'm the one who's sick from it.
Right.
So I did the testing and, I've access to this testing. So I did the testing on myself in the past and I was slightly positive. And now this is how doctors are bad patients. Not knowing then what I know now, I blew it off. And so when I did the repeat on the lead test, it was now noticeably positive. And I was like, crap, I really got a lead exposure.
Yeah.
So then I said, well, I have the mycotoxins and I have the lead and I had mercury. It's not so hard to expect that I would have other toxins. So I tested for environmental toxins, other environmental. That's like gasoline fumes and plastic, styrene, flame retardants. And I had a whole slew of those. And I said to my husband, oh my God, I'm such a dirty girl. And that was the impetus for writing the book, Dirty Girl, because I was like, if I'm the poster child for healthy living and healthy eating and exercise and sleep and all that, and here's where I am after living like that, what does everyone else have? Yeah. So we got to get the word out. So that is my story. And so I've spent the last 4 years getting the toxins out of me. Unfortunately, my body burden was way higher than the initial testing showed, because that's how it goes. If you're not a good detoxer, you don't show the full amount. So as I start to ramp it up, I was like, whoa, my mercury is really high. My lead's really high. I got my mercury fillings out. That's helped. But yeah, I've been on this path for 4 years to get the toxins out and try to minimize how many come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And and you're right. It's like we're living as clean as possible. We're doing all the right things. And this is what's transpiring. And you're right. It's like, what is everyone else dealing with? And I do find envirotoxins are such, I feel like in the past, probably 4 or 5 years in integrated medicine, it's definitely a lot more prevalent now, along with mycotoxins. It's like every time I hear about an odd symptom, I question, is it mold? Is it mold? And a lot of times it is. I think people don't realize how much that actually affects us and how many people actually are struggling with that toxicity, not even really realizing that that's what's wrong.
Right. Well, think about 50% of 50% of buildings have had water damage.
Yes.
So it's probable that you've either lived, gone to school in, been in a dorm, worked in, slept in, rode in, cars are water damaged too, that you've in some way had mold exposure multiple times over your life. And then it comes down to luck. Are your genes set up to get rid of them, or are they not? And often you don't know, and you just think, oh, I'm getting older. That's why I don't feel well.
And that statement, that slogan for, oh, I'm getting older, drives me crazy.
Nails on a chalkboard, right, Lisa?
Right? It's true. It's true. It drives me crazy. Okay, so talking about environmental toxins, right? Our health, our immunity. And so what do you think are some of the biggest misunderstandings about toxins?
I think one of the most massive misunderstandings is that it can't happen to me. Or I would know if it had happened to me.
Yeah, that's a common one.
That's a huge one, right? But because toxins masquerade as the diseases we expect to get as we get older, like diabetes, heart disease, weight gain, poor menopausal hormonal transitions,
Yeah.
degenerative diseases, autoimmune diseases, cancer. It masquerades as those, or it's the inciting event for those, and then it perpetuates those. So then we think, well, I'm just unlucky and I got ill early. No, you have a massive toxic burden and it's impacting your health. And
Yeah.
now you see the signs of it when you get a diagnosis. The diagnosis is the cue, you've got toxins.
Yeah. Well, and I find it interesting too. One of the things, especially when we're talking about metals, right? You mentioned lead, of course. And, one of the things about metals is that it speeds the aging process.
Mhm.
Right. So when someone says, oh, I'm just getting older, well, maybe they actually feel that way because of that aging process and the aches and the pains and the inflammation and everything they have going on. But again, they're not identifying and even knowing that there might be a root cause to why that's happening and why they're experiencing that more than, say, their neighbor.
Right,
Right.
right.
And so, what are some of the common types? I mean, there's so many different types of environmental toxins.
Mhm.
And so, let's talk a little bit about some of the common ones that you come across often.
Yeah, I think it's easiest, Lisa, if we put these into buckets
Hmm.
and categorize them. So, one bucket is heavy metals.
Yep.
The ones that you think about and worry about and should worry about
Hmm.
include lead, which is found in lead pipes. If you're still one of the 10 million Americans, we'll just limit it to America. If you're one of the 10 million Americans who
Yep.
have lead pipes in their home,
Hmm.
or if you grew up in the 1970s, there was lead in the gasoline, there
Yep.
was lead in the paint. So if you grew up in a house that was built before 1978, there's lead in the paint. And no, you're not chewing on the windowsills. But as the house settles, that it grinds the paint and the joists, the floor to the ceiling, the walls to the ceiling, the walls to each other, the walls to the floor. It grinds that paint and it dusts. And
Hmm.
then you either breathe it, eat it, or absorb it through your skin. And it can cause osteoporosis. It is linked to degenerative diseases, autoimmune diseases, hair loss. So there's a whole slew of things you don't want. So
Yeah.
that's one. Then there's mercury. You get mercury primarily through fish and fillings. So heavy metal fish. I'm very curious about what's going to happen with all the wildfires because
Yes.
forests hold methyl mercury. And when they burn, they release it back into the environment. It's a heavy metal. It falls. It lands on the ground and in the water. The fish eat the food in the water. So I'm
Yeah.
very curious about whether there's studies that will show whether the mercury in fish is increasing as a result of wildfires, but we're going to need some runway to see that.
Yeah.
And then the third is cadmium, which you get from smoking and you get from West Coast oysters. Those are the two big sources.
Hmm.
And what's really interesting is you also get 50% of whatever your mom had when she was pregnant with you.
Yeah.
It crosses the placenta. And so you, pregnancy and detox is a great pregnancy and nursing is a great detox event for your mom, but a tox up event for each of us.
Yeah.
So those are the metals. Then there's the mycotoxins. These are again from water damaged buildings. They're water damage or any type of damage, really. If you think about if you've had a flood, anything that got flooded has mycotoxins growing in it, unless it was aggressively aired out. And then, so these can cause autoimmune issues. Let me be a little circumspect, maybe not cause, but are implicated in autoimmune issues, weight gain, irritable bowel, skin issues, hair loss, brain dysfunction. All of them impact your brain function. And then the third category I'll call the other category. And that is all the things we use on a daily basis that aren't mycotoxins or heavy metals, but things like plastics.
Yeah.
Right on my microphone, my keyboard, my mouse, the EMFs from the lights, the plastic furniture that I'm sitting on that's vegan leather,
Yeah.
but vegan leather is plastic. The off-gassing from VOCs from either paint or finishes or stains, the gasolines that we pump to fill up our car if we don't have an electric car, the bed we sleep on has flame retardants in it unless it's organic. So there's a lot of ways we get exposed, the air quality, the water quality. That's that other bucket.
Yeah.
And we can get these toxins by either ingesting them,
Hmm.
putting them on our body, especially as women, we put on all these beauty products, or
Yeah.
it's around us, and we sleep on it, we breathe it in.
Wow. Well, and think about when you mentioned putting it on ourselves. I think
Hmm.
this is another big misconception that we make as individuals, thinking that we don't absorb all these things through our skin, right? I even actually heard, so there's an area near us right now that has been advised not to drink their water because it's been found to be high in manganese. So they're trying to, fix that situation. But they said it's safe to shower in. But they're going to be absorbing that through their skin, right? It's
Yes.
just like ingesting it. And so when we're putting on perfumes, and I mean, even in some natural products, there's still going to be titanium, there's going to be zinc oxide, right? Those types of things affect us as well. So I think that's a really key fact that a lot of people really don't understand or even realize is happening and can be the source of some of those toxins eventually as they start to build in the system.
Yeah, they're huge endocrine disruptors most of the time, especially for women.
Yes.
Although men aren't exempt from it either.
Yep.
But certainly for women, what we notice it faster. Men seem to have a greater ability or play in their elasticity and their resilience. For women, partly because of our hormones, we notice endocrine disruption. Fibroids are an endocrine disrupted
Hmm.
state.
Yep.
Heavy periods, endocrine disruption. Super painful periods that don't seem to have a cause, also endocrine disruption.
Yeah.
uh, Delayed menses, longer menses, irregular menses, all of these are issues where the endocrine system has been disrupted. And so absolutely, when we're putting these things on our skin, the skin is thirsty, and it's
Yeah.
our biggest organ, and it will absorb anything we
Absolutely.
present it with.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And so I want you to, can you explain the link here? There's one link between persistent infection, diseases, and environmental factors. What is that?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so in our practice, we have a bricks and mortar, and we have an online company. So the bricks and mortar company, we see a lot of people with Lyme disease,
Yeah.
and it's very clear that when people have Lyme disease, which is an immune issue, right? The immune system hasn't fought off an infection. Any of those people who also have high levels of heavy metals or mycotoxins or serious levels of other uh, toxins,
Hmm.
or if they have gut dysfunction, you cannot get a handle on their Lyme until you handle these other
Mm.
issues. They serve as so irritating to the immune system and so disruptive and so inflammatory, you can't get the Lyme handled. So this is a perfect
Yeah.
example when you talk about infections and immune system and like what drives what. So the gut drives everything.
Hmm.
But interestingly, heavy metals and mycotoxins in particular are extremely irritating to the gut. So you can't get a handle on the gut till you get a handle, you start with the basics, the food sensitivities and rotating the diet and healing what it needs. But then often the next cut of it is to remove, or test for and then remove heavy metals and mycotoxins because they're so aggravating.
Yeah.
And then you deal with the Lyme. We've said to patients, we're not going to deal with your Lyme for probably a year, or at least until you can do these treatments, start to notice an improvement, and then we layer on the Lyme treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes total sense. And so, what are some of the kind of risks and exposures to environmental toxins, and some of the approaches to assess those? What do you find is a good kind of avenue to take for someone in that respect?
Yeah, so there's a lot you can do on your own,
Hmm.
right? So you can convert from plastic utensils,
Hmm.
cups, shaker bottles, storage. You can do a lot of work to get rid of as much plastic in your life as possible.
Yeah.
And then, for example, we use a lot of metal in our house
Hmm.
for both shaker bottles and teacups
Yeah.
and storage containers, except they can have lead in them if they're created in another country. So
Ooh.
we always test them for lead before we use them.
Yeah.
3M has individual use lead testing strips that we use to test for lead. Obviously, it doesn't test for other contaminants, but it's a start, right?
Yeah.
It's like one less thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can do on your own. You can level up your food, go for organic and local, eat minimally processed food,
Hmm.
clean up your beauty products by using either environmental working group or
Mhm.
think dirty apps to look up your products. Like, did you do a good job or is there room for improvement?
Yeah.
And as you run out of something, that's the key. Don't get rid of all your stuff unless you're independently wealthy with 6 assistants who can do it for you. If that's not you listening, then do it when you run out. You've used
Yeah.
it for this long, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So level up as you can. And then there's a point at which you've done everything you can, and then you need to transition into testing and true therapeutic treatment. So what you've done on your own is reduce the amount of toxins you're exposed to, which is hugely impactful, important, meaningful, right? A good
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
And then you want to work with a functional medicine provider to get the data and systematically remove the toxins that have essentially, they're squatting, right? They're hanging out in our bodies. So we want to get rid of those in a way that's safe and effective and sustainable, because it's very easy to, go gung ho, but then be like, oh, I'm tired of this and I'm not done yet.
That happens so much.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we get committed, we have clients, they get committed, and then and they put in their time of 6 months. And I think sometimes people feel like you have to think about the fact that unless there is an acute exposure very similar to the one you described with lead, right, that was an acute exposure.
Yep.
But a lot of exposures happen over a period of time, right? They didn't happen overnight in many
Mm-hmm.
cases. And so it
Mm-hmm.
takes the body time to be able to mobilize and release those and have the energy to do that. And I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes people kind of get lost in that journey and they feel like it should happen faster. And then they get, and then they lose interest or they get a bit depressed about it. And so, how do you
Yeah.
manage when that happens? Because I feel like that happens so often.
Yeah, I always say to people, look, getting rid of your toxins is like a construction project. The wrecking ball, aka the toxins, came through and demolished the building in about a
Yeah.
day. You got your diagnosis, but now it takes a couple years to build something beautiful and functional and healthy in its place.
Yeah.
And you're going to be tired of this process long before it's done. So let's make it sustainable for you. So, in an ideal world, treating mycotoxins would be something that you do 3 times a day.
Yeah.
I don't know any woman who can do anything 3 times a day except maybe run to pee and refresh her lip gloss. Maybe, but there's no
Yeah.
way that a 3 times a day, apart from food and other supplements protocol, is going to be sustainable for people.
Right.
There's no way. And so what we're looking for is, what can you do in a way that'll just become part of your routine?
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of keep things in your bathroom, keep things with you,
Mm,
make your calendar do the thinking for you, since we're all slaves to our calendar. Put
right.
it in your calendar, have an alarm go off.
Yeah.
Don't rely on your brain, because your brain is full of taking care of your life. And you have these toxins, which is messing with your brain function. So go for sustainable, slow, steady steps. We are the tortoise, not the hare in
Yeah.
this. There's no rush, especially because it's an ongoing issue anyway.
Exactly.
So I was so psyched. I got down to 2 strains of mycotoxins. And then I walked into a house. I got like 5 steps in and I was like, oh, it's moldy. It's
Oh,
moldy,
goodness.
but I have to pee. I really need to pee. And I really wanted to see the house because we had just put an offer on the house. So I went to pee, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't stay in this house. And we're not buying it because there's mold.
Yeah.
So we rescinded the offer, but I got a mold exposure.
Hmm.
So you're going to get ongoing exposures in your life. Now, thankfully, I only spent 10 minutes there,
Yeah.
but ironically, interestingly, I was sick for the whole weekend. I was
Oh
sick
my
for 3 days
goodness.
after walking for 10 minutes into this house that had mold.
Wow.
And I noticed it mostly in gut irritability. My gut went
Mm.
nuts. So we're really looking for things that are sustainable, reproducible, and ongoing, and like a habit, as opposed to a special thing you do and then you stop. Because really, you're not. If you live on this earth, you're continuing to get exposed.
100%. I couldn't agree more than that last statement because people ask that all the time. Well, what do I do when they're all gone? I'm like,
Yeah,
well, they may never be all gone. They may be different,
right.
right? Because everything we do, everything we breathe, and everything we touch, there's the potential of that exposure.
Yep.
And I think we have to come to terms with that and realize that that's just part of life. And I mean, in many cases, it always has been. And so let's talk about therapeutic nutrition. Because obviously there's an approach that needs to be taken, whole foods, of course, when we have chemical imbalances or even nutritional imbalances. So how do you deal with that? What type of strategies do you use with regards to nutrition?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of eat real food and try to avoid pesticides wherever possible.
Yeah.
And if you're having a smoothie, exempt that from this discussion, but I'm not a huge fan of drinking your calories. So
Mm.
juice, soda,
Yeah.
sweetened drinks,
Yeah.
alcohol, not a huge fan of using those as a replacement. So I am a huge fan of saying, okay, eat when you're hungry, don't eat when you're not hungry. Intermittent fasting works for some people.
Yeah.
And then there's no one way to eat that works for everyone, but within a broad brushstroke, if you minimize processed food, minimize sugar, minimize alcohol, maximize organic food,
Mhm.
maximize green leafy vegetables, and make sure your flesh, if you eat flesh, is grass-fed, grass-finished, organic,
Yep.
you're going to do pretty well. Like that's a sort of framework for, okay, I don't have to be perfect. And yes, there's a place for what I'll call excursions.
Mhm.
So those are special treats. That's not nightly. That's like, oh, I'm going to a wedding. I did have a year in which I had 14 weddings. So that meant every month I was having something, right? But but outside of those, when everyone's getting married times,
Yeah.
you really can limit these to special treats.
Yeah.
And then instead of having a massive piece or have a couple of bites or a half a piece so that you don't feel left out, but really
Yeah.
to have it be an ebb and a flow and you didn't cheat. I go crazy when my patient's like, hey doc, I cheated. I'm like, you didn't cheat. You had an excursion. Did it work for you?
Yeah.
Did it work for you? Yes or no? No. Okay, great. What do we need to do to minimize the repeat of that?
Yeah.
If it worked for you, fine. If it didn't work for you, let's look to see strategies that we can support you in the future so that you don't perpetuate something that didn't work for you. That's all. It's not
Makes
moral, right? I'm not the
Yeah.
confession booth, and it is not moral. There's no Hail Marys here.
It makes total sense. And that's a good approach because, again, I feel like sometimes, well, and I feel like sometimes people will end up, that's the way the yo yo kind of, and we're talking about nutrition, but dieting
Yeah,
came in the 80s, right? Where it was like,
yeah.
we're kind of depriving ourselves and then people are going the other direction. So having a nice balance to that is really important. And again, it's a lifelong journey of health, right? It's
Yeah, and
not
I
just
think it's
something short
important.
term.
I think it's important, Lisa, to remember that your taste buds change over time.
Mhm.
So the more you eat of something, the more used to it you get. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, your taste buds will be accustomed to sugar.
Yeah.
If you eliminate that or decrease that over time, I have teenagers and they're like, let's drink boba. And so I get them the 30% sugar boba.
Yeah.
And I take a sip and I'm like, "Bleh." Like it tastes terrible. It's too
Yeah.
sweet for me.
Yeah.
So you can accustom your mouth and your expectations to be different. And it's very valuable because the less it tastes good to you or the too sweet it is, you're like, oh, I did a good job. Okay, great. Do less of it, right?
Yeah.
So ask for 10% sugar. Ask
Yeah.
for no sugar and put your own in just so you have control over it. But
Yeah.
but I think it's important to remember that your levels of craving right now, they'll change.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to kind of go down and just talk a little more about environmental toxins because there is another link I think is important to talk about because there are certain neurodegenerative diseases that go along with links to environmental toxins. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's pretty horrifying, honestly. Let's go just with endocrine dysfunction,
Yeah.
hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, aka Graves, Hashimoto's disease, fibroids, which is an endocrine dysfunction, Addison's disease, any of the autoimmune diseases,
Mhm.
all track back to significant toxic exposure. Now, here's the thing, Lisa. It's the studies will look at one thing, but what they don't look at is the death by 1,000 cuts that we're
Yeah.
experiencing because we don't ever experience one thing. So you can't say this one thing caused that one thing.
Yeah.
What you can say is this toxin is implicated in it.
Mhm.
It leads back to, it creates a state of inflammation and stress on the system. And then what you start to see are the diseases that your genetics will prime you to do.
Yeah.
So when you look at environmental toxins, a lot of them are implicated in cancer, degenerative disease, autoimmune disease. But I would caution in saying it's just that one, right? Like when you look at me, this loyal repository for all of these toxins, lead, mercury, 5 strains of mycotoxins, I've done the math, right? And then 8 different environmental toxins.
Wow.
We're talking about almost 15 different toxins.
Yeah.
And I wound up with autoimmune disease, celiac.
Yeah.
And hair loss, which is not an autoimmune disease, right? It's a problem. But so it's hard to say, well, was it the lead or was it the mercury? Or was it the 8 different environmental toxins? Or maybe it was the mycotoxins. You can't really tease that out because it becomes like a soup that's blended. And now you just have soup.
Yeah.
You just have a morass of soup. So, but there is a ton of data that draws lines between all of these toxins and cardiometabolic disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, Alzheimer's disease, cancers, degenerative disease. All of them do and can track back. Now, Alzheimer's has all these tracks you walk down, right? There's are your minerals and nutrients normal? Do you have other infections? Is your endocrine system off? Or do you have toxins? So you got to peel off all of those pathways. But we should be looking at all diseases like that. What's happening in the system? Let's optimize you level by level, and we can start to peel them off.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. And that is scary.
Yeah.
Very
But
scary.
you have control. You have control over this narrative and you have agency.
Yeah.
Each of us do.
Well, and so let's talk about some practical steps that people can take to minimize their exposure to some of those environmental toxins. Where do they start?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So I start with there's 2 places to start. One, you eat every day. So choose food that serves you. Choose food that lights up your body. So that's food that's organic if possible, minimally processed, local if possible. Not too much sugar, not too many carbs, mostly vegetables, some grass-fed meat, right? If you eat flesh. Really aim for and chew your food, because if you don't give your stomach and your intestines small particles, they can't absorb the minerals and nutrients. Slow down and eat. Be present. Decrease the stress in your body. Super easy, right? Well, I say it kind of tongue in cheek, but these are free. Taking a deep breath before you eat is free.
Yeah.
And then the second place I always recommend people start is, what are you running out of? Do you need more window cleaner? Do you need more laundry detergent? Do you need more toothpaste? Whatever you're running out of is a perfect opportunity to pick that one thing, look it up, find out if you did a good job or if there's room for improvement. And if there's room for improvement, level up to the best of your ability. Start to do this as a practice, meaning don't automatically order things unless you vetted them. Okay. So you start to get the flywheel moving of cleaning up your life. So, I mean, I have 4 kids. We run out of stuff all the time. So every one of those is an opportunity to level up and level up. And so it's important to not look at the road ahead and the work you have to do. It's important to look back and go, hey, look what I've accomplished. Right? After a year, you've leveled up anywhere from 50 to 300 items, depending on how quickly you go through things. So focus on just this one moment of leveling up. And then I do recommend that people filter their water and their air to the best of their budget.
Yeah.
So if you can afford a countertop filter, great. If you have one in your fridge, make sure the filter's up to date. If you can afford a whole house filter, great. And then put a point of use filter where you're drinking, because of the whole house will not, there's no reverse osmosis for the house. At least there wasn't when we put one in. So you need a reverse osmosis or a charcoal at the point of use so that you can get rid of perchlorate, which is not removed from typical filters. So filter your water to the best of your ability, filter your air to the best of your ability. And again, if you have one filter that you take from room to room, great. If you have one filter in every room, great. If you rent, don't put a whole house filter in because you don't own it.
Right.
But if you rent, get your bedroom, your kitchen, especially if you have a gas stove, because gas has all of these chemicals that it puts out. So filter the areas that you use, and it's fine to take it from room to room with you, but certainly filter the area that you sleep. Bathrooms are another moldy place, so filter your bathroom, make sure the fan is on and working, change the filters regularly so that they can do their best job.
Yeah.
So these are the starting things, right? Start with that. If you get a new car, filter that air because there's 300 chemicals in it. They're not in your favor.
Yes, that new car smell is not a good
Mm-hmm.
smell. That is
No.
toxins being off-gassed from the plastics in your car.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if you all know that, and maybe your jaw just dropped, but if it did, now you know.
Yes.
So, supplements, any better overall immunity? What should people be exploring in that from that perspective? What do you
Yeah.
think?
We're going to have to meet people where they are, right? So
Yeah,
if you're really just starting out and you eat most of your meals out of the house and you've not yet taken supplements, and you're really starting your wellness journey,
yeah,
maybe because you got a diagnosis and you were like, wait, I don't want that for my future.
right.
Whatever that reason is, if you're just starting out, that supplement pack is different from the people who are doing detox. So let's
Right.
kind of walk through it. So you
Yeah.
go, okay, what do most humans need? Most humans need vitamin D, a B complex, and fish oil.
Mhm.
That's kind of a grouping that'll get you through. Make sure your fish oil is high quality, that they're not giving you mercury from high mercury fish. So
Right.
make sure that it's a high quality brand. More issues than that. So make sure that you're getting high quality supplements. I absolutely love Amazon, but not for supplements because we don't know
Yes.
where their warehouses are, if they're temperature controlled, if they're not. So as much as I love Amazon, I order from it all the time, not for supplements. You want to
Yeah.
get your supplements through places where the chain of supplements has been tracked. You know exactly, it hasn't sat in an unheated, I'm sorry, an uncooled. It's really more about being too hot than being
Yeah.
too cool. And so you want to make sure that you're buying from reputable people. So that's like the one way I'm really brand conscious, and I'm like a supplement snob. So those three are pretty basic, great for people just starting out. And then there's more opportunities, right? A lot of people are iron deficient.
Hmm.
A lot of people need the antioxidants for support for detox. If you're deep in your detox journey, you're going to be taking things like chlorella and fiber and charcoal,
Yeah.
maybe even a prescription medicine, cholestyramine. You could be taking N-acetylcysteine, alpha-lipoic acid, glutathione. Now, you don't have to take all of those. This is just a list of like, what do we use?
Yeah.
And then we get specific for people's needs. So if you have a lot of metals, we're going to focus on glutathione and NAC and DMSA to bind those metals,
Hmm.
and chlorella and cilantro. So it just depends where people are in their journey. But I'm a huge fan of supplements. I take a ton myself, partly because I have bad detox and bad absorption.
Hmm.
So I do tend to push more into the system so that I get a normal amount.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes that's necessary,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes if we have those absorption issues, we've got to bring more on board just because we know some of them are going to be malabsorbed, but at least then we're getting what we actually need. And that's an important
Yes.
fact to walk away with too.
Yeah.
And so tell us about your kind of detox journey. You kind of did a little bit, but what I want to
Mm-hmm.
touch on is just if there was kind of one lifestyle change or one piece of advice, could be more than one, but we'll start with one, that you could give to somebody to make a lifestyle change for the better, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, I will say, Lisa, I mean, I'm a child of the 70s. And remember, I had this brewing autoimmune disease and terrible genes, and I wound up with a ton of cavities. And those
Mm,
cavities were silver fillings.
right.
And for many years, I knew they were mercury, but I didn't understand. I kind of thought that it was like a worry stone, and
Right.
the stone had been worn away and there was no more mercury in the filling.
Mm,
And my dentist disabused me of that. She was like, look, let's get real here. That's 50% mercury. Every filling is made up of 50% mercury. It
yeah.
never stops off gassing. Every time you eat, brush your teeth, chew something, drink, grind your teeth, whatever, you are releasing mercury into your mouth, and it goes into your system and you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And now it wasn't until a couple of years ago I knew that.
Hmm.
So when knowing now what I didn't know then, I would say if you are listening and you have mercury fillings, one of the most impactful things you can do for your health is work with a biologic dentist and get those taken out.
Yeah.
Get it out.
And that's the key, to work with a biological dentist.
Hmm.
Regular dentists sometimes don't take the necessary steps to plan, because that extraction can release mercury into the system as well and cause
It does.
toxicity.
Yes.
It has to
Yes.
be done in steps and properly as well. So that's
Yeah.
important to know too. And I
Yeah.
agree with you on that for sure. Yeah.
So that was a huge one. So it's so funny. I finally got my mercury fillings out 2 years ago, and I'm a huge fan of data. I say to my patients, I'm a data hog. Okay. I love data. And so I was wondering if getting my mercury fillings out would have been a placebo effect.
Mm.
And there are two things that I will point to say, nope, not a placebo effect. One, my recovery increased significantly after I got my mercury fillings out. I track with the Whoop, so
Yeah.
I track every day, and my recovery went up. Like I had a new baseline for my recovery. That was one. And the other was that my mercury had been stuck. I could not get my mercury levels to budge because I treat and I test and I treat and I test.
Yeah.
And after getting them out, my mercury levels budged. They're not negative,
Oh,
but they finally budged. And that was very impactful because I had been treading water for a while.
yeah. Yeah. And makes sense, right? It would make sense because it was just slowly being kind of kept up in the system with that release, right?
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I want to talk about the book. I want to talk about your book, Dirty Girl. Tell us about it. Give
Just have
people a
to
little
acknowledge,
snippet.
I will. I just need to acknowledge that they came on a different day. The landscapers came and they were super noisy, and I'm hoping it didn't cause disruption on your end.
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay, great,
No.
great. So the book is essentially a roadmap out of toxic living,
Love it.
because there's so many things we don't know, and you're doing your best, and you have good intentions, but sometimes you have bad outcomes with your good intentions. And
Yeah.
so the book is based on my story and stories of our patients and other people who have gone through it, people who have lost all the hair on their body and grown it back,
Wow.
people who have lost 100 pounds, people who, this is the story of people who, this is the impact on them, reverse their diabetes.
Wow.
So their stories are woven in with mine, and
Yeah.
it's essentially every chapter is meant to give you practical tools to clean it up, start preventing, alter your future, and take control of the narrative. You're driving this bus.
Yeah.
So it gives you the tools to have your hands around the right tools.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, and you know what? I do love when books give you some of those practical takeaways,
Yes.
because that's so important. We want to be able to take from it and learn from it and be like, okay, I'm going to do this today because it's something that's going to, right, enhance my life and help me to have kind of a non-toxic living, if that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that's out of our control, and the
Yeah.
book the goal that we had with the book was to give you back the reins,
Yeah.
so that you can ride the horse where you want it. I'm
Amazing.
mixing all my metaphors here, but really they give you agency and control and knowledge, like, oh, I never thought about that. My
Yeah.
patients will say to me, I'm rereading the book because I forgot about the impact of what I needed to do. Or I can only go one chapter a week or one chapter a month because there's so much to do in my life. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
not a race. It's
Yeah.
not a race. It's a
That's
race to
okay.
health. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. And everybody's going to have their own time, their own journey and
Yes.
their own timing. And that is okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, excellent. And so you've got another book coming out probably
Yep.
near to the end of 2024, Sweaty and Bitchy. I love the
Yep.
title.
Yeah. Well, I went through menopause. I'm on the other side of menopause at this point. And one day I'm sitting in the car. It's a beautiful summer day. I'm sitting
Yeah.
in the car. We're leaving. All of my kids are in the car, and they're a little bit younger than they were now. And my husband is doing something. I don't know what he's doing, but
Yeah.
he's puttering around, and
Mhm.
the car is not on. And I'm sitting in the car and I feel it. Like, I'm like, oh, so I have one of these mother of all hot flashes, and I'm
Oh,
dripping sweat, and he has the keys,
right.
and he pokes his head in. Honestly, Lisa, I don't know what he said to me. He pokes his head in the car and he said something, blah, blah, blah. And I'm in this, like, hot flash haze. I can't hear.
Oh my gosh.
And I looked at him. I was like the exorcist mother. And I looked at him and I said, do you value your life? Get on the car. And he was like, okay, dear. So he gets in the car, he turns on the car, finally ready to leave. We pull away. I'm like, oh, I am so sweaty and bitchy. And my youngest goes, language, mama. And I said, and that's the title of our next book.
Oh, I love it.
Because we all, it's a rite of passage and we all go
Yep.
through it, but there are ways to make it less painful.
100%.
And essentially, I did the wrong things and the right things so that I could give you with like, don't do this, do this. Here's the options here.
Oh,
So yeah,
that's amazing.
So that's the goal. It's like have women have empowerment through the menopausal transition.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right. So so get excited about that. And when you have that, when we see that book and then we know it's coming, we're going to have you back because I want to share all about that because that's a whole other journey, right? A whole other time of life journey, which is amazing.
Yes.
And so, and so for those of you watching and for those of you listening, we're going to have a special freebie from Dr. Trubow, which is going to be her non-toxic guide to healthy living. So make sure you visit the description. We'll have it shared on our website as well with the podcast description. So you can download that for free and follow some of those tips. And as well, Dirty Girl, available everywhere. You can order it online, filled with lots of practical implementations that you can do now to be able to detox and support yourself from those environmental toxins and other toxins that you might be exposed to and you may not even realize.
Yep.
So for those of you watching, subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's a brand new episode every 2 weeks. Give this one a thumbs up. And for those of you listening on your favorite podcast hosts, make sure you give this episode a like, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening to today's show. Head over to LisaPitel-Killah.com to gain access to some amazing free resources that will help you gain energy, erase debilitating symptoms, and be the best version of you. Remember to give this podcast a like and follow me on social media at Lisa Pitel-Killah. I'm here every 2 weeks with a brand new episode of the Human Optimization Podcast. Until next time.